Voting in South Korea's presidential election this March will be open to Korean nationals living overseas. But if you want to cast a ballot, you have to register at least 2 months ahead of Election Day. That deadline is 5 days from now. Our Kim Do-yeon has this report.
In just 5 days, one of the first checkpoints ahead of the 2022 presidential election will be reached as overseas voting registration closes. Unlike the procedure for voters in the country, overseas voting requires registration prior to the actual polling date for the voters. Overseas voting will take place from February 23rd until the 28th, but registration ends on January 8th. And the National Election Committee says currently around 159,000 have signed up, still falling short compared to the 2017 presidential election when overseas voters amounted to 222,000. COVID-19 has been affecting overseas voting heavily, as the upcoming presidential election will be the second major election during the global pandemic following 2020's general election to vote in National Assembly members.
Due to the pandemic, 87,000, which is more than half the eligible voters overseas for the last general election, couldn't vote.
Director Kyung hopes that more overseas voters register this time around as the country will be voting in a new president, which always gathers more interest. In addition, registration usually picks up speed during this last few days of registration as seen in past overseas elections. This screen shows the registration status for overseas voters. As soon as a voter from overseas signs up, it's updated automatically with details such as region, gender, and sign-up method. This year, 206 voting centers are planned to open in 117 countries. That's 2 more centers than 2017's presidential election. Voters are made up of those studying temporarily overseas who won't be in the country on election day, deployed military, as well as permanent residents of other countries that still hold onto South Korean citizenship.
The COVID-19 pandemic continues, but we have been preparing based on our experience from the last general election. Even if it may be hard to participate, we ask that you do to practice your precious right to vote.
From Asia, with more than 10,000 permanently registered overseas voters, to Africa, with just 27, the country is trying its best to make sure the constitutional rights of these South Korean citizens are protected. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.